Hello, Bio 130 students. We are going to get into the nuts and bolts of the respiratory system, which essentially has, two main functions. It's essentially for replenishing oxygen through the process of inhaling, through taking in air, and then also because our bodies produce carbon dioxide as a waste product of using oxygen. The respiratory system gives us a way to release that gas, that carbon dioxide that builds up in our body. Now, there are two main zones that the respiratory system can be broken up into. The conducting zone is essentially the pathway that air travels. And, essentially, what the conducting zone does provides a route for air to come in or out, whether we're breathing in oxygen or exhaling, breathing out carbon dioxide. Allows for the removal of debris that would be hazardous to our lungs. So the conducting zone kind of acts as a safeguard, to certain things that if it were to make it into the lungs, it would be quite troublesome, like viruses or if you swallow a liquid. The conducting zone has machinery to help bring that back up instead of allowing it to go all the way down to the lungs. And it is also pretty good at removing pathogens, things that cause diseases, such as bacteria, viruses, other microorganisms that you definitely do not want in the lungs. And that's all the conducting zone, essentially where air is traveling in the respiratory system. And then the respiratory zone is where gas exchange happens between the air in the lungs and the blood circulating in our body. Now, for the machinery of the conducting zone, you can start off with the nose and the nasal cavity, which, if you are a nose breather, the benefit of this is that it cleans and warms up the air and also humidifies it so that it doesn't dehydrate your lungs as it's going down toward them, or pull in, or essentially cause, that's the point. It cleans air, it helps warm it going through your nasal passageways, it helps humidify it so that it's at a better set of parameters as it's going into your lungs. Lower down will be the pharynx, which is a tube of skeletal muscle which serves to further help protect against pathogens that are going down the airway. And then even lower, just below the pharynx, would be the larynx, a structure formed from cartilage which connects the pharynx to the trachea, and it serves to control the volume of air. Continuing into the conducting zone, this is still where essentially air is traveling. This is the gateway between things going down your esophagus, like food and liquid, and things going down your trachea, air, would be the epiglottis, which is a flap that is part of the larynx, and it helps cover the tracheal opening. It helps cover the opening to your trachea, allowing food and water, liquid, to go down the esophagus instead of down the trachea. Now, if it does go down the trachea, like what was said, being part of the conducting zone, there is machinery to help push that food or liquid back up and then down the esophagus. But luckily, the epiglottis does a great job at preventing most of that from ever happening. And then the long tube of hard cartilage, the windpipe, would be the trachea. This goes from the larynx and then essentially is what eventually branches off into each lung. Trachea, it's the long cylinder going from the larynx up until the first initial branching of the bronchi. The bronchi can we think of as sort of an upside down inverted bronchial tree where there are different levels of branching. The first set of branching, the branching that goes from the trachea to each individual lung, that would be the primary bronchi. Singular are bronchus. That initial branching of the trachea, the primary bronchi, that just serves as a passageway going either to the left lung or the right lung. Now, the primary bronchi break and branch apart even further into secondary bronchi, which is just meant to give more, it's to help spread out the airways that are actually traveling inside the lungs. And then what are sometimes called the terminal bronchi or tertiary bronchi are the bronchioles. And they're just the final branching of the bronchial tree. Some data, which is not necessary for this class, but the bronchioles, the final branching, they can easily be a millimeter in diameter, less than, far less than a quarter of an inch. If a centimeter is a quarter inch, or 2.4 inches, don't worry about that. Metric to customary mech. About 1,000 per lung as far as bronchioles go, so about 2,000 if you have both of your lungs. And these bronchioles, they lack cartilage tissue, which allows them to be more flexible. Now, at the end of each terminal bronchiole are going to be where the respiratory zone begins. This is the part of the respiratory system where gas is exchanging, either oxygen going into the bloodstream or carbon dioxide going from the bloodstream into the lungs to be removed later. And well, with the bronchioles, these connect to the alveolar sacs, which essentially look like grapes, which is actually a very great way to put it. Each sac consists of many alveolus, or, well, that's the singular. The plural is they consist of many alveoli. That would be what the individual grapes would be of the alveolar sacs. And essentially, these are just a network of capillaries which allow the transfer of carbon dioxide out of the bloodstream and the flow of oxygen into the bloodstream. So essentially, this is where the pulmonary arteries will take carbon dioxide-rich blood to the lungs. Carbon dioxide will diffuse into the alveolar sacs, into each alveoli pocket, alveolus pocket, and when you are inhaling, the air in your lungs is rich in oxygen, or more rich than what's in the bloodstream. So oxygen will go from each alveolus and diffuse into the bloodstream, into the pulmonary veins, to be pushed back toward the heart. And we'll get into the diseases in a separate video. But that's it for the nuts and bolts of the respiratory system.